What's up, everybody? I was listening to those annoying vegans debating some guy named Professor and another guy named Phil on modern day debate. And as it tends to be the case with vegans and, that whole thing, they were talking about ethics, morality, blah, blah, blah. So, because I was tickled by I think it was Anna, her statement that, quote, morality evolves, unquote. I guess I wanted to talk a little bit about that and morality in general. Now, I have been asking Modern Day Debate for about a year now to have me on debating a vegan, but for some reason they're very reluctant to put me on. They did offer me a spot versus those annoying vegans, but they were trying to make me team up with some guy named Professor, whom I don't know anything about. I've never had any contact with that person. And as it turns out, and as I suspected it would turn out when I listened to him debating the vegans, I was maybe 95% in disagreement with what the professor had to say. So why would I team up with someone like that? Seems like they want to handicap me. I don't know what it is, but I'll keep pestering them. Maybe eventually they'll put me on. I've said many times, just not to go on too much of a tangent. I've said in the past that most of these vegan debates are set up, they're framed a certain way. They're cherry picked. The opponents are cherry picked, and that's because the position of veganism is untenable. Veganism does not make one valid or sound or logical or whatever the hell you want to call it argument. Well, maybe it has some sound arguments, but it doesn't have any valid arguments, so it just makes the whole thing invalid anyway. Prove me wrong, yeah? Anyway, let's talk about morality, subjective, objective. I have some new thoughts I wanted to add, and there's at least a question or two I wanted to address. So, we have to be on the same page before we continue, right? If at any one point you disagree with what I'm saying, then you're going to have to debate that. Don't hop in, midway through my logical progression and then try to argue whatever I said, toward the end of my argument when you didn't agree from the beginning, right? That wouldn't make any sense. We have to agree in order for the conversation to progress, right? So morality is what? Principles concerning the distinction between right or wrong, or good or bad behavior, right? That's morality. What's good or what's bad, right? Right or wrong behavior, right? Morality. Or the principles guiding behavior. So, my question is, do you agree, right? Does right or wrong behavior exist, right? If you think it does, then morality exists. If you don't think it does, then morality doesn't exist. Okay, you could leave now. So if we agree that there is morality, meaning good and bad behavior, right or wrong behavior, do you also agree that truth exists, right? However you enter that question, you got to be making a truth claim, right? So if I ask you, does truth exist? And you say no, or you say yes, you're making a truth claim, meaning, yeah, you believe truth exists, even if you say no, right? You can't say no. That'd be a contradiction on your part. So truth logically has to exist, right? Is it possible to lie? Well, if it's possible to lie, then it's also possible to tell the truth. Do you believe that? Well, then truth exists, right? Are you with me? You have to be, right? So truth exists, right and wrong behavior exists. So then, are there moral truths? Do moral truths exist? Right? And if morality does exist, And you let me know if I have this wrong. If morality exists and if truth exists, then there is true moral behavior, right? There's true right or wrong, right? And if there is something as true right or wrong behavior, with truth being universal, right? Then objective morality has to exist, logically, no? Does it not? If you agree that morality exists, you have no choice to disagree that truth doesn't exist. You must agree that there's objective morality, right? Your only other option is to say that there is no such thing as morality. That's your only other option. Because if morality exists, logically, I would think it has to be objective, as I just explained to you. I hope that makes sense. You let me know if I got this wrong. So, I got some interesting criticisms. Last time I talked about morality in my video entitled, quote, "Morality is objective, it would seem," unquote. Right? If it exists, it must be objective. Someone said that, just look at nature. There is no morality in nature. It doesn't exist. And the argument was, I can't find the comment right now, but generally the argument is that, well, these animals they're not behaving morally, right? Well, hold on a minute. If you're looking at the natural world and you're seeing immoral behavior, and that leads you to believe that morality doesn't exist, didn't you just contradict yourself? How would you know if these animals are acting morally or not? Because morality has to exist, logically. Just because you see animals, or even people, acting immorally, that doesn't debunk the fact that objective morality exists. Now, if you don't believe it exists, then you believe anything is cool. Everything is permissible. There are no rules, right? If morality is, logically, there have to be no rules if morality is subjective. And just because people or animals or whatever act immorally, to even say that they act immorally, you have to agree that morality exists, right? So to say, look at these animals or savages, these savage people in nature, they're acting immorally. You just proved that morality exists. That you believe that morality exists, rather. That doesn't necessarily prove that it does, but you think it does. You must think it does. Because they're acting immorally, according to you. Which somehow you want me to believe is proof that there is no morality. You're not making any sense. Right? So in this debate, Anna said that morality evolves. Now, if by morality you mean what's acceptable, obviously to a moral objectivist, that's nonsense, because morality is what it is, right? It doesn't evolve. We have no impact on it. Nothing has impact on it. It just is what it is. There's a right, there's a wrong, just as there is truth, and then there are lies or untruths. Right? These are just facts, observable realities of life, right? However, I suppose if you're a moral subjectivist and morality to you means the way in which society deems behavior, or what society deems as appropriate or inappropriate, right or wrong behavior, right? But again, that brings me to my original point. If morality is subjective, then there is no morality, right? Because morality, we already established, is the right and wrong, or wrong. What is right and what is wrong. And truth also exists. So there has to be, if morality exists, it has to be a true and objective thing. You can't say there even is subjective morality. I mean, you could say that, but what that really means is that there is no universal morality. There is no true morality. And if there is no true morality, there is no morality, right? Right? Can you say there are untrue, I don't know, white people or black people, right? If there are no true white people, then there are no white people, right? If there are no true black people, same thing. They don't exist, right? So to even say that morality is subjective is to deny the existence of morality. And if morality doesn't exist, how can it evolve? But if you're saying that, I would say you're talking about ethics, or what any particular society or individual deems is correct in any particular, environment. Like if we have a group of people and we decide that this is our ethical code, like for example, it's okay for an executioner to kill people, right? But it's not okay for you and I in this society. I'm not talking about moral, insofar as societal ethical codes go, right? It's okay for some people to kill others, and it's not okay for other people to kill those same people, even though that the person being killed is guilty of whatever we deem gets them executed. Only the executioner or people in charge of that, killing other people, are ethically allowed to do that. You're not allowed to do it yourself, right? Take matters into your own hands. I would say it's immoral to kill that person no matter who's killing them, right? But maybe it's ethical because these are societal ethical standards and they have nothing to do with morality, really. Not the way I see it, right? I mean, why is it that it's completely and utterly arbitrary, right? And it's completely and utterly subjective, that it's okay for an executioner to kill a murderer, but I can't do it? Weird, right? It doesn't really make much sense. So if you mean that our ethical standards evolve, that might make sense, but I don't see any evidence for that, right? Because the presupposition is that, well, we treat women better today than we did before. We eradicated slavery, right? When we haven't, there's still slavery, right? Maybe some women in certain geographical areas are treated better than before, but when it comes to other geographical areas, they're treated worse. And what do you really know about history, right? How long is our history really? And how deep, the further back you go, the less detailed it is. And a lot of places don't have any history, right? Meaning written record, recorded, or record period of their customs or whatever. Like we have some idea of the people that may have lived here or there all over the world, but we don't really know their history, especially when it comes to their ethical standards, right? So like to say that women were treated better or worse 6,000 years ago in this particular area or all over the world, it's like you have no idea. Like how arrogant can you be to make these statements? Now maybe you're just brainwashed, but if we're being honest, we have no idea. Compared to what we know today, we have no idea how women were treated even 100 years ago, insofar as every single corner of the planet. Forget about 5,000, 10,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago, right? So to say that morality evolves because there was slavery in the United States and there's no slavery in the United States anymore doesn't make any sense, because there's slavery other places and there is slavery in the US. Look at the prison system, right? You could be enslaved for selling marijuana or not paying your parking tickets. You could be enslaved for that, right? Come on, man. Look at vegans. Look at most of the people picking your strawberries or your avocados or harvesting your nuts, whatever it may be, right? Your coffee. A lot of these people are, and they're enslaved. The way in which they're treated is no different from how slaves in the Americas were treated at one point, right? So to say morality has evolved, like I don't see any evidence for this. First of all, it doesn't make any sense, as I already explained. But if you want to say our ethical standards evolved, which assumes, generally when people say that they've gotten better, we've gotten better as a people. I see no evidence for that whatsoever. And just as there were few and far between, mind you, if we're talking about United States, slaveholders, most of the people didn't own slaves. Now you may say, well, that's because they couldn't afford them. Oh, fair enough. But there were also abolitionists. Every single society that had slaves, people and slave owners, also had people who were against that. Well, you think the slaves, for example, were cool with slavery? Silly people. What are you saying? Are you really looking at the world and trying to be honest about what it is we know and being logical about this shit? Or are you just reverse engineering reality because veganism, right? Let's try to be honest. So, yeah, I see absolutely no evidence for even our ethical standards evolving. And it would seem that if morality exists, it has to be objective, right? Because if you say morality exists, you agree that right and wrong exist. And we all know truth exists, right? I hate to be repeating myself, but I guess sometimes you have to. In closing, I'm going to answer this very kind comment from Dorian J. This is the kind of double-digit IQ rant that results from not defining your terms properly before you start using them, and then blah, 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 blah. Then employ them inconsistently. Clearly this person is triggered and emotional, right? Can they be that and rational at the same time? I would say it's not likely. Then he goes on to define subjective and objective exactly in the way that I've been, this is just one video in a long series of videos from me. So this person is doing what I told you not to do, right? If you're going to engage me in the conversation, just because you're watching one video, that doesn't mean you're not jumping in the middle of the conversation, right? So you don't know, and I can't in every single video because it would be as long as this one or longer, go back to the beginning and start defining everything, right? I did that a little bit here. But, this video references other videos, this video where this comment was left, where I have defined those terms. So, this person is just really arrogant. Things like changing on a whim, he continues, or being arbitrary are not prerequisite for something being subjective. I don't even know what that means, to be honest. Even if it's instinctive or ingrained, the fact that an agent has to ruminate on the question makes it a subjective one by definition. He probably means the agent has to ruminate on the answer to the question makes the answer a subjective one by definition. So the simple fact that you have to think about what may be an answer to any particular question makes that answer subjective. Well, that doesn't make any sense, right? Just go back to the beginning of the video. And the point with a lot of my videos, the overarching themes of all of my videos, and a lot of musings of a lot of other people online, has to do with what we're interested in the truth, right? We're not interested in simply our opinions, right? Just because we ruminate on something, well, that is potentially how you get to the bottom of it, right? That's how you find truth, by philosophizing, right? Asking questions and answering them. That doesn't make the truth subjective. I don't know what this guy means to say, but he sounds like a postmodernist, that truth is subjective, meaning it doesn't exist. Right? Again, we're going back to the beginning of this video. So just because you have to think about, the world and try to find the truth, that doesn't make the truth subjective. You're not creating the truth, you're discovering it, right? It's not up to you. If we use logic and we follow philosophy or logical progression and we don't make any fallacies, hopefully we could get to the truth. And if we can, then that's objective. It has nothing to, just because we used our brains and certain logical mechanisms to get to the truth, that doesn't make the truth subjective, because we're merely discovering it, not creating it, right? So this doesn't make any sense. But, you know, you need a double-digit IQ to get that. I talk about the idea that morality being subjective means that everyone should, in principle, be okay with moral disagreements because they acknowledge that morals are subjective, but no one believes that. Why doesn't that make any sense, right? Yeah. If you believe that morality is what I say it is, what you say it is, what anybody else says it is, then can there really be morality? Can there be right or wrong when it's up to a whim and anyone's opinion is just as valid as everybody else's? That's like saying that, it's like this saying that pisses me off every time I hear it. My truth, his truth. And I know what sometimes people mean by that, but that's an erroneous use of the word truth, because there's only one truth. There's no such thing as subjective truth. Truth is independent of anybody, right? So again, if you truly believe that morality were subjective, you wouldn't have a problem with somebody else having a different opinion. But you do have a problem with that. You're trying to impose your own view onto somebody else because you think your view is the morally correct one, right? Meaning that it's a objective. It's the simplest way of explaining the contradiction. It is a contradiction. It has to be, right? If you believe morality comes from everywhere and anywhere and anybody, what anybody says goes, right? It's up to the subject to determine what's moral. There is no morality. And the reason why people who say morality is subjective are walking, talking contradictions and in conflict is because they have to accept that, but they don't actually accept that. There's a conflict there. Why is the conflict there? Because they're not making any sense. Because for morality to be subjective, you have to accept it doesn't exist. But as soon as you say that this is morally wrong or right, you're saying that morality exists. Just like that person saying, look, these animals are acting immoral, meaning there is no morality. No, there is morality, which is why you know they're acting immoral. How is that so difficult, right? The thing is, what people believe is continuing is completely irrelevant. Whether or... I mean, it's kind of telling that you call someone low IQ and then, you know, I guess not being able to spell isn't necessarily an indication of low IQ, right? But I mean, that on top of the fallacies and not being able to understand basic concepts, you know, it's not looking good. So if I'm double digits, I shudder to think what this person is. Whether or not what morals are subjective is a matter of definitions. What? That doesn't make any sense. He just defined subjective and objective, and I agree with those definitions. Those are the definitions, insofar as most of us would agree, I think. They are subjective because at the end of the day, the morality of any given action must be evaluated and determined by an agent. That doesn't make it subjective. Again, just because you are using reason, logic, hopefully, or your own faculties to hopefully find out what's true, that doesn't make it subjective. Because again, you're not creating truth, you're discovering it, hopefully. The acknowledgement that this is the case doesn't change the fact that people see their moral system as being above all others and will inevitably seek to impose it on everyone else, right? But if we're talking about morality and we're having a debate about morality, the only way in the moral debate, I would think, right, you could prove your morality to be superior is if it's true morality. And this brings us back to the original point. If it's true morality, then it's universal, and it's objective. It has nothing to do with you, right? So if you can't prove that your morality is objectively correct, and you're looking to impose that on everybody, especially as a vegan, well, that's a contradiction from within your ethical system, whatever that may be. However fucked up it may be, vegans don't believe it's morally correct to impose anything on anybody, right? Don't they believe in, I mean, if they believe animals should be free to do, think, whatever they want, then obviously they have to believe humans are as well. So they cannot impose their subjective worldview on anybody and be moral, even from within their own whacked out worldview. That's a contradiction. Okay? And that's the point I wanted to make. I've been making for a while. But again, this person is joining the conversation halfway in, and they think that they just, he has a superiority complex, basically. Blah, blah, blah. In fact, that's literally what subjectivity is all about. And this is by design. And we have been selected through evolution. So is it design or is it evolution? Which is it, buddy? Oh, God. For our ability to create an environment in which our genetic line will be experienced. It's just like, evolution, though. Because evolution. Science! That's not an argument. To say evolution is not an argument. You would have to first prove evolution, which no one has ever done. It's just a theory. Just like gravity was a theory for a while, and from what I understand, and I don't understand, I'm not interested in any of that, but from what I heard, well, that was debunked, right? The inherent subjectivity of morals doesn't diminish from this, but relies on assuming that morals being subjective means they don't exist, which is an incorrect application of the words morals. So he must have different definitions. He's not interested in mine, and he's trying to impose his own. So we can't even talk about, I can't even address any of this because I don't know what he means by these things, right? I've defined them over the course of however many videos. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. Acknowledging that what you see as evil may not be so in the eyes of someone else is not the same as delegating morality to that other person. On the contrary, it is by recognizing that difference in worldview that you identify that person as your moral opponent, rival, enemy. Then, as nature intends. He knows this because evolution. You can either choose to let that person be, and in so doing become permissive of that moral difference, but simultaneously avoid conflict, or you can choose to attack and potentially impose your morality onto them through force. See, this is what subjective morality leads to. It's just a bunch of nonsense. Like, imposing your morality onto them through force is moral. What? Because anything goes. That is might is right in a nutshell. Morality is determined by the winners, the last one standing. Okay? Dog eat dog world. This is the world of subjective morality. And no one really wants to live in a world like that. No one really believes that's moral, right? Even the winners, when they get the short end of the stick and become losers, then they start crying about, it's immoral, it's wrong, what you're doing is wrong. But they had no problem doing it to other people, right? Look, just because people are evil, that doesn't mean morality doesn't exist. It actually proves morality. Because we understand that these things are evil. We might not be able to explain why that is, And people like to run to this, well, we were brainwashed by society. Well, who brainwashed the first person? How did that first person know this? Who brainwashed them? Anyway, this idea of subjective morality is a whole bunch of self-refuting nonsense. Now, I will grant you that if you want to say that morality doesn't exist, period, then that's fine. I disagree, but then we can't have, that's your worldview, I have a different worldview. Please don't try to have an ethical debate or a debate about what's right or what's wrong when you just said that morality doesn't exist. Because to say that it's subjective is to basically say it doesn't exist. It's the same as saying truth is subjective, meaning truth doesn't exist. Does truth exist? Well, if you say no, you just made a truth claim. So yes, it's very important to look at not just what people are saying. Don't listen to just what they're saying, but read between the lines and look at their actions. If somebody says morality is subjective, but then rejects your subjective morality as immoral, this is the important part, as immoral, then the only way that they could have a leg to stand on in a moral debate is by proving that their morality is superior. And the only way you could have true superior morality is if it's objective. I hope this makes sense, because it makes perfect sense to me. But if you think I went wrong somewhere, you let me know. Thanks for listening. Have a good day.